So, thank you so much for having me out here today, filming
Thank you.
with me. It's kind of unique how we met.
Yeah.
So y'all were just in the salon you're getting a haircut.
Yeah, I had Googled the salon and had the best ratings, so I went there to get a haircut because I'd been here a while and I hadn't had one, and I figured that I needed to find somebody. So ratings was what did it for
You
me.
got beautiful hair.
Thank you.
Wow. So, and then you picked up my book, Be Beautiful Being You.
Mhm.
Brought it home, and I guess you read it.
Yeah. Well, yes, I did, and I got to page 42, and I felt like I was impressed. I felt like the Lord told me to message you.
Yeah, and that's how we connected.
Mhm.
That's an amazing thing. You know, I think God's this force, this power greater than us, and brings us together. Because how would you know? And I've sat down and filmed the stories of survivors of sexual abuse,
Right.
and you being a survivor. So I guess I want to start, Shonna, by what what is sexual abuse in your mind? Define that for me.
I feel it is any time something is happening with another person that is not consensual, or if that person is too young to understand what is happening.
So let's go back for a minute because I don't like to. I know it's important just so you know the viewer knows who you are, what you went through. But let's go back to when you were sexually abused. Did you know as a child, or did you learn that later as an adult?
As a child, I had headaches through the years, and I'd get sent home from school with headaches, and for a long time, everybody thought I was pretending because I didn't want to be at school.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, they started taking me into the doctor to try to figure out what was wrong with me. They did MRIs and brain scans and different tests, and they could never find anything wrong. But when I was 12 years old and my parents had been divorced, I went to stay with my dad, and I was wrestling with a relative, and we ended up in a kind of a sexual position, and all of a sudden, all this stuff just flooded back from when I was a child. And
So this wrestling kind of jogged a memory in your head. That wasn't necessarily the exposure of sex at that time, but it jogged something in your head being a child that took you back to that place.
right, I mean, it was somewhat inappropriate what happened, but it wasn't anything that would have been probably traumatic for the average teen. But being the things that had happened to me, when he was on top of me and he kind of grinded a little bit, all of a sudden I just started having flashbacks.
Felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, how old were you when you first were sexually abused?
The first memory I have, I was 4 or 5, but I don't remember everything. You know, I have quite a few memories. My most distinct memories are like smells and certain scenes, you know, sounds.
Jogs your memory.
Know that I can sit and I can smell the smell or hear the fan or feel how the temperature of the room, you know. And I mean, there's some vivid memories of the things that were happening to me, but I think it started pretty young because I can't remember.
Do you ever recall telling someone or saying, I don't like this person or I'm scared of this person?
There was a time when I spoke out. I believe it was when I realized it, though, when I was 12. And I'm not sure if it was before I was 12 or not, because you know how family talks about stuff, but you aren't sure exactly the place and time that it happened. But I did bring it up, and the main person that had done it, because as you know, with people that are sexually abused, a lot of times there's other perpetrators. It's not just one.
Mm-hmm.
But the main person in my memories that I did bring up, he was confronted, but then it all just kind of went away, and I was sent back over there like nothing had happened. When he had stopped, it was before I turned 12. I don't remember the age it was, but I was very angry, and I started threatening him. I started telling him I was going to hurt him and I was going to do something to him and he better stay away from me. And it was so strange because I can remember saying the things I said, but I don't remembering why I was doing it. You know, I
Well,
was
you know,
doing
in
it.
all fairness, if you're 12 years old and you've never kissed someone, or you never had sex with anyone, or you've never um, done anything sexual, why would you know? I think sometimes survivors, especially, articulate back that they just felt uncomfortable, they felt violated, they felt
Hmm.
scared, they knew something was wrong. But as far as having the vocabulary at 12 years old to articulate that, that's a, we can sit here today and do this at our age, but
Right,
you know, it's hard to do that if you've never, if you
right,
don't even know what that is and your parents have never discussed sex with you or never had sex.
right.
It is difficult to articulate. So was he the, what was his age?
60 something.
So he was an older man.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And he was an alcoholic. I could always smell alcohol. You know, there was always alcohol involved usually, which I'm sure, as much as he drank, even if he wasn't drinking, he probably wasn't mentally straight. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, I always wondered. You know, he passed away. I always wondered what happened to him to make him do those things, because people don't just do that.
Right.
It comes from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard rumor that his brother had done the same thing to his grandkids.
Well,
So,
that's part of the cycle, I think,
right.
that society knows about. They talk about that cycle and how do we break the cycle. I think what you're saying is true. We have a tendency to focus and want to hate the perpetrator, but we forget
Right.
that they were once a child.
Right.
They once had their innocence taken from them, and so let's move forward. I want to know, like, when you went into 12 years old, when you went into 15, 16, you started driving, you started dating. Did you suppress it at that point in time and just become a regular teenager?
No, I acted out a lot. Well, I wasn't ever in a safe situation wherever I was. I was continually targeted no matter where I was. I didn't feel safe. So I was very rebellious. I was a pothead by 12 or 13. I think I started doing the pot and drinking because of the memories that came back and I didn't know how to deal with it. But I didn't have sex. I was still a virgin. The stuff that happened to me, he couldn't ever penetrate. You know, tried, but didn't happen. So I was still a virgin. I felt like, you know, I'd been in church for many years and felt like the thing that I had to give to a marriage was my virginity. That was very important. And so I still felt like I had worth, even though that stuff had happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I got some counseling and started realizing, oh, it wasn't my fault. Oh, that was wrong, you know, and I started having these light bulbs go off. But then, you know, I had a stepdad that was mentally, had some issues. You know, I went to my dad's and he, you know, drank and partied and stuff, and I wasn't stable.
So you really didn't have a father figure in your life
Mm-mm.
that was, I guess, held you to a certain standard or taught
Right,
you
they
a
didn't
certain
hold me
way?
to a standard. My dad was like my best friend. We went out and partied together and drank.
Yeah.
You know, he took me in the bars with him.
And so how did that affect your life other than smoking pot and drinking alcohol? Where did you
Well,
find yourself? Tell me spiritually, like where you broke down
okay.
self-esteem, where you,
When I was a teen, I started, you know, really questioning about God and trying to understand. And trying to understand why he let those things happen. I was like, if you love me and you're there for me and I'm a child, I'm innocent, why would you let this happen to me? And so when I was about 15, I had my first boyfriend in the church, and we ended up breaking up. And it seems like people like us that go through those things, when we go through a breakup, instead of us holding our standards, we let go of our standards to grasp what we're losing. I don't know why. So he started dating another girl at the church, but I still had this huge crush on him, and I was one of those people I just didn't know how to let go. And he wanted me to sneak out one night with him and his brother, who was older. He was 15, his brother was 16, and then this other guy that was supposedly a cousin, and he was 22. And so I snuck out, you know, naive teenager, 15 at the time. And we went and got Mad Dog 2020, and we were drinking. And then we go to the lake. And, you know, I didn't know what boundaries were. It's hard to believe. You know, sometimes I sit down and go, wow, how could you be so naive? But, you know, I was. And me and the guy that I broke up with that I had such a big crush on were making out. And Next thing I know, he's trying to have sex with me, and I'm telling him no, but I'm not saying it real loud because I have no confidence. I'm just saying it quietly. And he has sex with me anyways. And so I didn't feel like I had the right to even say anything. I was just like, whatever. You know, I was hurt and I was drunk, you know, all those emotions going on. And then I don't know why I would do it, but I went skinny dipping with them, all these guys. And the next thing I know, they have my clothes, they throw them in the trunk of the car and they lock them in there and they make me get in the car with them, and the 22-year-old starts raping me and forcing me to have sex with him. And I'm like, no.
Wow.
But it happened. And when I went to school the next day, the 16-year-old didn't rape me. He felt too bad. He was watching what's going on. And I don't know how many times I was raped. I blacked out, you know. I don't remember all the details.
And so let me stop you, because you said to me, and I can tell through your tears that still bothers you. You still carry some sort of responsibility towards that.
Well, I don't feel responsible. I don't I understand, even when you're hurt when you're young, how you can see you're hurting somebody. And it just makes me wonder, how do you do that? You know, I know sometimes you don't understand you're hurting. Like, you know, I'll yell at my kids or something, and I'm like, later, wow, I shouldn't have done that. My kids, you know, that hurt.
Sure.
You know, but how do you do that much of an action? You know, I've forgiven him, but I just wish I could understand. I wish I could talk to him and just ask him, you know, what's going on in your life? Are you doing better now? You know, are you in prison? You know, have you met the Lord? We were in church, you know, did you have a realization come to you, you know?
So this was the boy that was in church with you, or he was just another part of the church group?
It was him and his cousin and his brother that we were all out together, and we all went to the same church.
And so, have you forgiven yourself? You said, I went skinny dipping. Have you forgiven yourself? Or do you feel the need to forgive yourself?
I have. Sometimes, you know, the hard part for me is I didn't a lot of times tell people that I had gone skinny dipping with them, because I was like, well, I was stupid, you know? And so that's really, I think I cried because it's hard for me to even bring that out, because that hasn't come out, you know?
Yeah, but just because you go skinny dipping with somebody doesn't give them the right to rape you.
Oh, I understand that. I know that. But other people, a lot of times, don't understand that.
Right.
That have been brought up different. If they haven't been through those things, they don't understand not having the boundaries.
So maybe your boundary was crossed because, in your eyes, being raised in church, a Christian teenager, you felt you were doing wrong against God, and maybe hold some sort of responsibility to this was your punishment for making that choice. Would that make better sense than...
When I was young, that is how I felt. I felt that choice made God angry at me, because, you know, how can he protect me if I'm making a choice like that? You know, I even went to school the next day and told people that I had sex with them by choice, because I was always the strong one, and I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want anybody to think I was weak. So, okay, well, now I'm going to put on a front that I'm strong, and I'm going to go ahead and look like a whore in my eyes. You know what I mean? Because now I'm just making it look like it didn't matter. But I did feel like I was unworthy. I couldn't say my virginity anymore, and I started sleeping around after that, you know. Then it was like, well, I have no value. Well, I'll just, sure, if you want to let's go to bed. You know, I didn't have really a standard to stand by anymore.
And maybe it gave you some sort of power to take ownership to it, to not look like a victim, but to look like it was by choice that it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I did a lot of things just to seem like I was in control when I wasn't. I thought I was, you know. It's crazy, you know, when you start working through all these things, and you're wondering where God was, not realizing He's right there. He's there, but we all have that free will that He gives us to make choices, and sometimes other people are hurt.
And we just don't think that free will's going to hurt us when we're kids or when we're teens, right?
Right.
I mean, we can look back and acknowledge that He was there and not point the finger or blame him in some sort of way. Some of us can. I think survivors for sure can.
Right.
Because, you know, when you look back on situations, you're talking about your child abuse or you're talking about your rape in that moment. It could have been you know, what's worse, but it
Right.
could have been a whole lot worse.
Right.
It could have been death, or it
Right.
could have been murder, or there's a whole lot of things. But in that moment, I know whenever I was raped, I can remember thinking to myself, I always share this with people because there's two things I remember. I knew what was going on. I was roughly 20, let me think about this, 24 years old, 23 years old. And I knew that I was being raped, but in my mind, I kept thinking God was with me. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but I kept thinking to myself, let me just get this over with, get this over with, get this over with, because I didn't want them to physically harm me or hurt me.
Right.
It's very scary.
Oh.
And so I kept thinking, let me just get this over with, and the pain will subside, and it'll all go away.
Right.
So was God with you in that moment looking back?
Well, I'm sure he was, because, I mean, we were out at the lake. Nobody was there. They could have done anything. I mean, when they were done with me after driving around and that one guy, you know, raped me for however long, you know, they threw me out on a pretty, it was a busy road during the day. It wasn't busy that night because it was like 3 in the morning. But they threw me out with no clothes and they drove away.
Wow.
And so I'm standing there and I saw some bushes and I ran to the bushes. I didn't feel like going to anybody's door because I was so ashamed.
Sure.
I was like, I'm naked and what am I going to tell them? I went out drinking with these guys and then, you know, I didn't feel like I had anything to state that it would even matter. I guess because I'd been a victim for so long, I was just like, you know, I don't have anything to say. And so when they came driving back by, because I guess one of them felt bad and wanted me to get back in the car, I didn't even really care if they were going to kill me. I didn't care what happened. I just didn't want to be where I was at. I got back in the vehicle and they took me back to my house and gave me my clothes back. And so, you know, I moved on. But I moved on into an even worse situation where I was really partying hard. I ended up homeless for a while because of choices I made and not wanting to be around my stepdad. I didn't trust him. And when I was homeless, I got raped more.
So you're
You know.
literally living on the streets or living in a car? What do you mean when you say homeless?
I slept in the laundromat. I slept up in the rocket in the park. I slept in garages. If somebody slept in the garage. There were some kids from school that their parents went back to Mexico. We stayed in that house until we got kicked out. I mean, with, you know, no food or anything. I mean, me and my friend, we'd go and we'd scrounge around the ground for coins to buy nachos to eat for the day so that we'd have something to eat. It was miserable.
You get to this beautiful farm,
Well,
a homeschool teacher to your children, a mother of 6, your husband, who I love. He's a great man.
oh yeah, he is.
How did you get chickens? We got the rooster crowing. How did you get from sexual abuse and rape and homeless? How did you get to where you are?
Through many trials and tribulations. I had 2 rocky, broken marriages. Lost a son along the way.
Passed away?
Yeah, he was born with, he had the umbilical cord in a knot and around his neck 3 times. He was born in a coma. They had to put a G-tube in. He had to be suctioned because he couldn't swallow. He lived for a year. He was miserable.
You're a strong woman.
Somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you now? Because you do. You use your life, you and your husband, and y'all lead congregations of people. You share your testimony and your trials and tribulations, and you give God the glory. How did you make that transformation?
I decided, because many times I tried God, but I didn't work it like a relationship. I worked it like the fortune teller. You know, I'm going to open the Bible to a scripture and it's going to tell me what I need to do. I'm going to go and read my devotion for the day and that's going to be my answer. Just like you go and get your hand read or, you know, the fortune. I was trying to make him into something he wasn't. And I don't know, I started working on my relationship more and changing myself. But the key time was 2 years ago when we moved here, and I wasn't around all the familiar anymore, and I got away from it, and I got to where I talked less and prayed more, and I spent a lot of time praying and searching and really working on my relationship with him. And I found a good church, started going to church, and I hadn't been to church on a regular basis since I was 15.
Yeah.
And just really focusing on that relationship and getting to know him, and him not speaking to me occasionally, but he got to where he was speaking to me all the time. And I mean, now, I met you because he spoke to me, and I knew, even though, a lot of people think, well, that's just me talking. No, God talks to you. You just have to learn to hear him.
So you're saying you accepted that you were this spiritual being and that you had a discerning spirit inside of you, and that discernment began to listen to the words of other people that you were around, and as they begin to open up and share with you God, something greater than them, a message of empowerment or inspiration, that kind of began to feed you?
More so, I really got in the Word and started reading the Bible and learning what he was saying to me for myself, instead of what the preacher says. I mean,
amen to that.
I learned so much. I'd been in church off and on all my life, but when I started reading it, I was like, one of the verses that really hit me was when Jesus said, "No one is good but God." And he was in here on earth saying, "No one's good but God." And I was like, wow, that really lifted a veil for me, because I always thought I was a good person. No matter what I was doing, whether I was lying,
dope, drinking,
I was a good person. And so I started realizing in the broken relationships I was in, since I thought I was a good person, and I'd be with somebody and they'd say, well, I'll never be good enough for you. And even though they were cheating on me and the things they were doing, but the persona that I was giving to them may have been impossible, because I thought I was so good.
That's always amazing to me, because many survivors share the same thing. They're like, I smoke dope, but let me tell you something, we'd have church at the house, we'd all be high. And people are like, how's that possible? Because we place God inside this box or inside this church, and we say, you can't drink, you can't lie, you can't smoke, or you can't possibly know him.
Right.
But the truth is, as a spiritual being, I believe he's our creator, and we do know him. It's just a matter of us connecting back to him and sacrificing those things to grow closer to him. And I think that's what you're sharing you've done.
Right. And I had to learn that we are attracted to what we know, and when you've been abused, it's really hard not to get attracted back into those same types of people and situations. Usually what you are most comfortable with when you start trying to break away from it is what you need to stay away from. And I didn't understand that. Anytime I dated somebody, if I was really comfortable right away, I wanted to be there all the time, and we're together, and next thing I know, I'd be in a relationship and they're a porn addict or they're a drug addict or they're alcoholic, and I'd be going, why do I keep going out with these type people? When I dated Kelly, he was not the norm for me. It was not, we talked great on the phone and stuff, but the dating part was not comfortable. It was different. He didn't drop everything and call me every second. He didn't just act like I was put on a pedestal like everybody else that would, when they started dating me. They put me on a pedestal. I'd be there for a few months or a year or whatever, and next thing I know, I was thrown on the ground and they're walking all over me, Whereas he treated me like an equal. He treated me like a friend, like, a person. And it was weird for me, because I was like, does he even really like me? Because I was so used to everybody dropping everything. And we don't really have conflicts. Like in every other relationship I was in, there was always huge conflicts, huge. But I realized that it wasn't the norm for me,
And so he became your friend.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And how long have y'all been married?
Well, we got together. We've been together 9 years. We got married. It's going to be 2 years in a month.
And so, when did you tell him when you were dating you had been sexually abused? Was that not even by that time? Was it not even an issue?
Oh, I shared because I had been dealing with all of that for so many years that I didn't realize that all the stuff I was going through the rest of my life was affected from that, because I talked about it. I wrote about it. I worked through so much of it. Time we ever really hung out was like for 30 minutes, and I was sick with the flu, and he started asking me about where I lived, and I said in Lacey Lakeview, and I said on Cedar Street, and I said I'm in the only 2-story house that's blue at the end of the street. I didn't even think, you know, Shonna, you're giving him every detail of your life.
Yeah.
So next thing I know, when I get back with the medicine I'd picked up from being sick, he is parked right outside my house, and I'm going, oh man, don't tell me it's another stalker. Because he's right there.
Yeah. So he's going to sing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get him out here.
Okay.
All right, this is actually a secular song, converted, a few word changes. Before you know Christ, life seems hopeless. Start reading His Word, realize you got somewhere to go. Day after day, I'm more confused. Yet I look for the light through the pouring rain. Know it's a game that I hate to lose. I'm feeling a strain. Ain't it a shame? Oh, give me the peace, Lord, and keep my soul. Wanna get lost in your loving word and give away. Give me the peace, Lord, and keep my soul. Wanna get lost in your loving word.